Hello everyone, welcome to listen our group presentation. Our protagonist today is Japan. We will be from these five aspects to analyze Japan.
For the past 40 years, Japanese companies achieved global leadership by dominating their home market. But this has been unstable as Japan's population is expected to fall from 127 million today to less than 100 million between 2040 and 2050. A declining population will almost certainly reduce the absolute level of private consumption, along with tax revenues and overall GDP. However, luckily, globalization was a key to overcome this problem. Globalization has contributed to the expansion of overseas markets and boost productivity, which allowed Japan to maintain its prosperity. Furthermore, it boosted the international trade of Japan. International trade contributes significantly to the Japanese economy, with exports equivalent to approximately 15.6% of GDP in 2020. Their key merchandise exports include motor vehicles, machinery, and manufactured goods. There are positive impacts which globalization led to the relationship between Japan and Australia. With the help of globalization, it allowed Japan-Australia Economic Partnership Agreement (JAEPA) to take place, which entered into force on 15 January 2015. It gives Australian exporters significantly improved market access in goods and services and substantially improves investment protections in Japan. In 2020, Japan was Australia's third largest source of goods and services imports, which is valued at 19.9 billion, including passenger motor vehicles 8.0 billion, goods vehicles 1.8 billion, and refined petroleum 1.1 billion. Also, transport services at 0.9 billion, civil engineering equipment and parts, which is 0.8 billion, and personal travel, which is 0.8 billion. Despite the positive relationship, Australian firms entering Japan should be aware of their legal systems. Japan prohibits foreign shareholdings in broadcasting, telecommunications, and aviation industries. There are fixed maximum foreign shareholdings ratios, and Australian firms will have to hire more local employees in running their business. Next, Japan's corporate tax burden is moderately high compared to other East Asian countries, which will require more cost in running the business. Exclusive political and business networks can hinder foreign investment and disadvantage overseas companies in competition for contracts. Also, a high overall cost structure makes market entry and expansion expensive for foreign investors. Lastly, Japan's high risk of natural disasters, including earthquakes and tsunamis. Overall, Australian firms can benefit from close relationship between Japan and Australia, but also needs to be aware of above issues and regulations in order to prepare a solution in advance to prevent or mitigate from getting negative impacts. Next, Coco will further talk about the relationship between Japan and Australia.
Thank you, King. And economic developments, we know Japan is a free market economy and its scientific research capabilities industry based on manufacturing technology and among the best in the world, and it's also the first largest import and export country in the world today. Japan GDP in 2021 will account for 3.69% of the world economy, and Japan's economy is highly developed. The quality of life of citizens is high. And Japan's HDI index has always been at the forefront of the world. The university have national scholarship for college students and local government scholarships, corporate scholarships, and interest-free student loan provided by bank. And in terms of medical care, Japan's nationwide coverage rate since 1961 provide medical service, and medical insurance have reached 99% break first in the world. And also in Japan, if you work in a company with relative healthy and pregnancy benefit, you can also receive normal wages during maternity leave. The first transformation promotes the transformation and upgrading of cost-based industry. International strategy implements the strategy of powering the country with information technology. The shift stemmed from the pressure on the yen to appreciate after the Pisa Accord. After the Pisa Accord in 1985, the yen appreciated and on the other hand expanded overseas. Among them, the direction of industry structure adjustment in mainly the information industry and culture industry. In January 2001, the Japanese government put forward strategic goals of building Japan into the most advanced IT country in the world. After 5 years of hard work, the information industry has become the largest industry sector in Japan. When a country moves toward a economically developed state, the country's upgrading and optimization dependence on poor labor will inevitably decrease and the requirement for talent will increase year by year, which will inevitably lead to the pyramid phenomenon. In such a social situation, the higher the level of education, the wider the field of vision, the higher the pursuit of nature, the requirement for fidelity no longer focus on quantity as before, but more emphasis on input and output.
Hi, I'm Hao Xianzhen. Those China and Australia are both in Asia-Pacific region with relatively small geographic distance. The two countries have distinctive cultural difference, which might influence the business communication and partnership between orientation from two countries. In this section, hostilization culture dimension and whole cultural context are used to assess the cultural difference between two countries. In hostilization cultural dimension, national culture is viewed in 6 aspects, which are power distance, individualism, masculinity, uncertainty, avoidance, long-term orientation, and utility. According to hostile Japanese culture score higher than Australian culture in power distance, masculinity, uncertainty, avoidance, and long-term orientation, whereas it score lower than in individualism and utilitarianism, influenced by higher power distance and collectivism in national culture. In a business context, Japanese tend to accept unequal distribution of power between leader and follower, and they are provides the connect gain and loss in decision making. Those attitudes and behavior can rarely be found among Australia, and lower power distance and individualism culture motivate Australian to purchase equity and person interest in interaction and cooperate setting. Besides, different from Australia, who are structure oriented and emphasize value in decision making, Japanese focus on evaluating long-term consequence of decision, and they may retrain their desire and behavior so as making achievement to be successful. Those behavior and attitude difference between Japan and Australia are also associated with masculinity of Japanese culture and femininity of Australian culture. For Australian firms that plan to expand into Japan, I recommend that they should pay close attention to augmentation culture different understand in observational culture dimension. To be specific, they should achieve important to the way how they communicate with Japanese partners, customer and employee to adjust their corner of power distance and connective good. Besides, when cooperate with Japanese firms, Australian firms should be prepared for high-level uncertainty avoidance and long-term orientation in Japan culture, removing Japanese partner corner of potential risk and loss. When it comes to communication, whole cultural context model also explain the difference between Japan and Australia in this aspect, according to the way that people use language and nonverbal communication whole. Divided culture into high context culture and low context culture. According to Hall 1990, high context culture is usually group-oriented, and people influenced by such culture usually focus on relationship, formality, hierarchy, and status. In contrast, lower context culture provides personal control over the environment, informality, and distress. 189 influenced by context culture. Japan has a typical high context culture, whereas Australia is widely considered as a low context culture. As a result, interpersonal and business communication, Japanese emphasize much a formal manner to maintain the relationship with mother. Japanese may not directly expect their international or opinion, especially negative one in verbal language, where then they may use a lot of body language to convey meaning. In comparison, Australians tend to be more direct and straightforward in communication, using verbal language to especially express their attitude and intention. The difference in cultural context indicate Australian firms should pay close attention to the way how they interact with Japanese partners to avoid misunderstanding and misconduct when doing business in Japan. Thank you.
Hello everyone, thanks to my group member Hao Xinzhen. My question is discuss which industry Japan should focus on and which theory should follow when seeking to trade with other countries. Firstly, I would like to introduce Adam Smith's theory of absolute advantage, which refers to the theory that international trade can be win-win. Ideally, each country would only produce goods in which it has absolute advantage and import all the rest. I believe that Japanese wagyu is an industry of absolute advantage for Japan. Also, Japan is not rich in national resource, and wagyu is a unique resource for Japan. Davis-Ricardo's comparative advantage means that a country has a comparative advantage in product if it has a lower opportunity cost for producing that product. If each country specialized in producing and export a product in which it has comparative advantage, such international trade can be lead to an increase in world output and benefit all countries. In the case of Japan, if we choose a David Ricardo's theory of comparative advantage, industrial manufacturing is an industry with comparative advantage. Also, Japan is a small country with very few domestic resources. It relies heavily on foreign import for energy and mineral resource. However, Japan is developing high technology and has achieved a win-win situation with countries that provide the raw materials. Since Japan did not have abundant natural resource, especially oil, the market of oil industry raw material and agricultural product proliferates and become available at lower price, which provides Japan with extremely favored condition for raw materials. At the same time, the newly independent country after the war and some other developing country also urging need to buy various machine and equipment and high technology product for the international market in order to developing their national industry. So Japan industrial product has a very favorable international market. For Japan, the automobile industry is Japan's comparative advantage industry because it do not have sufficient oil resource. So in terms of oil, the Japanese automobile industry managed to adopt electric hybrid, rechargeable hybrid, pure electric fuel cell, and other technologies. For both series, I believe that Japan should choose David Ricardo's series of comparative advantage when seeking to trade with other countries. Because Japan do not have natural resource, Japan should take advantage of the international environment of abundant oil resource and abundant supply of industrial raw materials in the market, and active apply the theory of comparative advantage. For example, produce and export industrial product in large quality and import resource such as oil, agricultural product, and industrial raw materials that the country lacks, and then use their primary raw materials to produce industrial product. Use the high technology into processing from a cycle. In the good case, countries are encouraging to join international trade, create mutual benefit trade market. A bad situation is that there is excessive capital and only a large number of producing can be explored, and it will driving down the price of product.
Thank you to those who spoke before us for their presentation. Now, let's take a look at Japan's trade policy instruments. Importing and exporting has been a core trade strategy for Japan for many years. This goes back to Japan at the immediately end of the World War II, when the Japanese economics was in the doldrums and so needed to import and export a lot to maintain its economic position, with the exception of a few special goods or special payment method. The Japanese government placed no restrictions on companies engaging in processing, trade, and granted preferential tariff treatment. It is also part of Japan's international image as a self-confessed processing country. So, with import and export being the main policy, tariffs became the main trade policy instrument for Japan, followed by import and export quotas for the purpose of protecting the domestic economy. For example, Japan signed the GAEPA with Australia, in which cooperation was made mainly in relation to tariff barriers on both sides. The agreement includes tariff reductions and high duty exemptions for import of specific industries on both sides. GAEPA is the most liberal trade agreement Japan has negotiated and implemented to date, and Australian service provider will benefit from Japan's services in a wide range of industry. All these places reflected the Japanese government's steering of the economies. Also, as the WTO report points out, Japanese supplies are protected more because of the internal regulations. Therefore, this Japanese trade policy instrument It's actually more like neo-mechanicalism in international trade theory. At the same time, in an effort to broaden and deepen contacts between the parties, both Japan and Australia have to join the RCEP, a regional economic cooperation agreement that aims to strengthen economic ties, enhance trade and investment-related activities, and reduce trade barriers. Also improve marketing access for goods and services for businesses in participating countries. This has actually made it easier for Japan to add its trade policy. That's the end of our presentation. Thank you for watching. Here are the literature and the sources we have used.